It was part of a wider university project that was funded by the Centre for Innovation and Engagement, looking at the different resources that could be used in flipped learning to provide students with the sort of lecture information, as it were. Having come into it not knowing very much about flipped learning, after learning a little bit about what it was, I decided that I would flip the whole of the module that I was teaching on the Roman army, rather than just experiment with a bit of the module. I thought I'd flip the whole thing so that the students got used to the idea of flipped learning. It was all planned in advance, and when the students were pre-enrolling for their modules back in the April-May, I advised them that it was likely that we'd be doing some experimental teaching on the module. A large number of them were sort of interested in how the teaching would work. I knew that I was going to have to prepare the teaching materials in advance and then work out what we were going to do in what had been the timetabled lecture sessions and were then going to become sort of classroom sessions. Because I was aware that our students hadn't had any kind of flipped learning experience before, really, I thought I'd be a little bit conservative in how I presented to them the information that they were previously getting in informal lectures. I was also a bit worried myself about being taken away from the live lecture experience myself, because that's something I really enjoy. It's a great part of the job. And I was worried that it would impact the way I taught, speaking to a camera rather than actually having a group of students there. I didn't do any of the recordings over the summer. I've done them bit by bit over the course of this academic year, partly so that I can respond to any feedback I've been getting from the students. I used Panopto with personal capture rather than event capture. The advantage of that meant that I could do it in my own time, in my office or wherever. I could prep a small amount, do that section to camera, then prep another bit, so I was constantly refreshing stuff. I discovered very quickly that I would get an extra 6 or 7 minutes out of a normal 50-minute lecture slot because I wasn't having to interact with the students. There was plenty of time for more material or to investigate things in more detail. So it was also an opportunity to refresh my lecture material much more thoroughly than perhaps I might otherwise have done. So each week I'd sort of sit down, prep the lecture, do it to camera and then edit it. I would do each lecture in 2 or 3 sections, and this was partly a sort of natural suspicion of technology. If the thing crashed and died, I didn't want to lose an entire lecture, so by doing it in sections I was minimising the risk. But the other thing is, because it's a research-led course, I didn't want to be in the position a couple of years down the line of having to record a large amount because there had been some new scholarship. So I deliberately broke it up so that if I need to in future, I can re-record a section of a lecture and just slot it in. I had some interesting reactions from the students. A very large number of them were very enthusiastic right from the start. I had a few students who were a bit nervous about the idea of talking in class. But I'd thought about that beforehand, and I had broken the students up into small groups. So there were groups of about 5 or 6. We had a large lecture theatre to do this in, so there was plenty of room for them. And within each group, I appointed one person centurion, because it was a course on the Roman army, one person scribe. And those were roles that rotated every week. The job of the centurion was like that of seminar tutor, to ensure that everyone was contributing to the discussion. The scribe's job was to write down the major points and then present them to the other groups in the lecture theatre. I had a few students who were very nervous about it to begin with and sort of emailed me saying, I'm really not sure about this. But then I reassured them within a few weeks. They were sort of emailing back, sort of saying, actually, this is really working, I'm enjoying it, you know, it's as you said. I did have a few students who dropped out right at the beginning, which was sort of interesting because of the reasons they gave. One said that they wanted to get a high mark on the module, so they didn't want to risk experimental teaching, so they went off and did another module instead. And I had a couple of students who said very honestly that they paid to come and sit here to listen to experts talk and for them to sit and listen passively. They didn't pay to come here and discuss things with other students and debate things in class. I'd promised the students we would do an interim survey at Christmas. If they really hated it, we would go back to traditional teaching. I got 50 responses from the class of 60, 3 of whom said please revert to traditional teaching, and the rest said just carry on flipping because they were enjoying it so much. Quite a few students who really appreciated the opportunity to be discussing things in class, and a number of students who were aware of the value of the recordings, the Panopto recordings that they could use for revision. Students said that they sat and watched them, that it meant they could pause the recording if they didn't quite get something, they could rewind it. If they didn't quite understand something, they'd pause it, look stuff up, check facts, explore things in a bit more detail before continuing. As I mentioned, I felt that we were covering a lot more material, or covering material in much greater critical depth than we'd been able to previously. I've seen the students enjoying it and developing intellectually over the course, but I've also really enjoyed it because although I love lecturing, I'm a teacher, and I felt very much that in that room I was teaching, helping students to learn rather than just talking to them. I thoroughly enjoyed the active learning as well, and it's re-energised my enthusiasm for the module as well. I think one of the main things is the amount of time that you need to invest, and it is a lot of time up front that you need to invest in this. The programme itself, Panopto, was absolutely fantastic. It was really intuitive, and I found the editing very, very easy, and very quickly got into the habit of sort of pausing and re-recording a bit if I didn't phrase it how I liked. I didn't become a perfectionist about it because it's just a lecture, but I think I'd say Panopto is a really, really easy programme to get the hang of, at least on the basic level that I'm using it. But you are putting in that much more time, and that needs to be factored in. You know, as I said, I'm going to reap the rewards from that next time I teach the module. And I think also reassuring the students who were unused to different learning experiences, and many of them are actually quite conservative when it comes to the way they want their education served up. So it's reassuring them that this will be beneficial to them. And the actual room, I've always felt that the room I teach in has quite a significant impact on the way I teach and the effectiveness of it. It was a bit daunting, intending to flip a class of 60 for a whole academic year, but you know, ultimately I've been really pleased with the way that it's turned out. I hadn't used Zante or anything like that before. And that's one of the reasons I was so pleased that Panopto was, once the learning technology guys in the college had helped get me started, I was really pleased with the ease with which I picked it up. I particularly liked being able to do the personal lecture capture rather than the sort of formal event capture, simply because I could just do it under my own terms. Yeah. That was great. And no, as a school, we are moving next academic year to recording all core, certainly all core first year modules. We'll do lecture capture on that. So I think this was a way of showing colleagues how that could be used in a different way. Just this basic experience of Panopto that I've had has given rise to lots of ideas through the school about how we can use it elsewhere. Particularly with more technical skills. We're a sort of wide-ranging schools, and students are doing various things. They're looking at paleography, they're studying inscriptions, they're studying artefacts, they're conserving artefacts, and actually to be able to do a short film showing how to analyse an inscription, how to decipher handwriting, or how to conserve an object, I think would be hugely beneficial, big time saver in the future. and in fact colleagues in conservation are now going to be using Panopto to record the basic lab safety briefing. So instead of someone having to do an annual safety briefing, students can log it on Panopto, and then of course if a student comes in mid-year, they can just pick it up that way rather than having to wait for another repeat of the lecture.